Hello there. A few days ago I gave a talk for Nikon at the photography show up at the NEC all about the Moment of Impact campaign that I shot last year for Nikon's D500. Now I was hoping to be able to video the entire presentation and therefore just share it on YouTube the easy way. For various technical reasons I won't bore you with, that proved not to be possible on the day. However, I was able to get hold of a clean audio feed from the Britney Spears-esque microphone I was wearing, and so of course what I've done is taken that audio feed and whacked imagery over the top of that as if you were watching the real presentation. So, still lots of useful information in there about the technical side of things, about my thought process, about the creativity that went into it, and the practical aspects of organising a big shoot like that where stuff's being smashed apart and blown to pieces. Couple of quick caveats. Firstly, the audio quality is pretty good, but there are a couple of little pops and dropouts on it, which I apologise for. And secondly, there are, of course, a couple of moments when I'm physically demonstrating something, including at one point where I'm trying to trigger flashes, which in fact didn't work very well on the day. So, of course, you can't see that. Otherwise, though, all the content's there. Hope it's educational. Hope it's useful. Enjoy.
Morning, folks. Welcome to the Nikon stage, if not already been sitting here through Dixie's fantastic presentation. I'm Tom Miles. I'm going to talk you through the imagery that I created for the 500 Moment of Impact campaign. I'm going to take you right through the actual thought process that went into creating the stuff in the first place. Lots and lots of very technical bits and pieces as to how we come up with all the high-speed action stuff, and some really practical nitty-gritty bits as to how you go about smashing lots of things up and managing a shoot that's quite as complex as that. Now, in my career as a sports and action photographer, I spend a lot of time photographing high-speed action stuff. Sometimes that's live events where, of course, I can't control what's happening. And sometimes, thankfully, it's events like this where I can control. I can be in charge of the situation, and that's great. Now, at the start of this, I was approached by an advertising agency who do media stuff for Nikon, and they came to me with the concept in the first place. They want to do fast, robust, and powerful, because that's what the D500 is about. And, of course, it's always a bit challenging when somebody comes to you with abstract words and abstract ideas. That's one of the challenging things about professional photography. Somebody gives you a nice abstract thing like fast, robust, powerful, and then asks you to make something actually tangible out of it. Lots of ideas were knocked around. One of the early bits we settled on was, right, let's work with an MMA fighter, because MMA fighters, they're fast, they're robust, they're powerful, so is the 500. Okay, that's our starting point. So we had lots of meetings, lots of discussions, lots of storyboards at the beginning. Straight away, well, fairly early on anyway, we dismissed the idea of actually shooting an MMA fight. A couple of reasons for that. Firstly, it would put quite a few people off. Secondly, of course, it's not that interesting. It's not that impressive. It's a fairly obvious response to fast, robust, and powerful. The images would lack, pardon the pun, punch. We then moved on to, okay, what about having the fighter striking and smashing things? And this had a lot more grip. We thought, right, there's much more in this. This could go somewhere. We began to come up with, okay, what can our fighter smash? What can we have him fighting against? One of the first things we suggested was things like cinema props, like sugared glass bottles and balsa wood chairs and that kind of thing. And then people said, oh, what about bits of food and all sorts of bits and pieces? So we knocked around lots of ideas to start with. We dismissed the cinema props fairly early on for the simple reason that no matter how many disclaimers we would have put on things, of course, we couldn't be sure people wouldn't go home, take their kitchen chairs and break them across people. We hope that won't happen, but of course, a lawsuit's not something the Nikon are particularly after. So we settled on attacking food, smashing various foodstuffs up. So we then start, of course, right, what can he attack? How can he attack it? How can he strike it? How are we going to work it? And this is where all your research comes in. This is where I trawl back through my own work and various references I've got of how I capture high-speed stuff and look at other people's stuff where they've smashed high-speed things up and start to build from there. The agency were obviously scrounging around, desperately looking for an MMA fighter who was suitable. They charged upon the fabulous Tom Duquesnoy, who I've pronounced correctly, I think, who fights in the BAMA promotion. I hold my hand up and say I don't actually know what that is, but apparently he's very, very good, and he was incredibly good on the day. He was also very excited about the fact of, rather than facing a human opponent in the ring, just taking on some inanimate food stuff. So he's good to go right from the outset. The agency then did little bits of their own research. And if I can get my little clicker to play along. Hang on. Where are we? Come on. I need my little clicker. I'm going to do it that way. Much better. They actually tested out how easy it is to break a watermelon. And, of course, if you have a cricket bat, it's very, very easy indeed. I don't know if they painted a manager's face or anything, but I think it was a distinctly more enjoyable afternoon in the office than usual. From there, it was time to start scouting locations. Now, again, we have lovely abstract words and bits and pieces, and the agency said, we're looking for somewhere gritty and grungy. Right, it's so helpful when people give you an abstract, random, sort of vague term like that. How very helpful. Anyway, straight away we ruled out shooting outside for the obvious reason that we couldn't control the lighting and it's just too big a risk. We then ruled out shooting in your standard white Infinity Cove photo studio, because of course that's not very gritty and grungy. So lots of location research, looking through various places in London, narrowed it down to 3, and then went out, myself and 3 people from the agency, and actually physically went and looked at the locations. Now this is a bit of a luxury, obviously, but if you get the chance to do it, it is so worth doing. No amount of pictures on a website can ever give you quite the same feel as to actually going in a place and walking around it and looking through various angles and realizing there's columns in the way that you didn't know about, or looking at how the light falls. It's also important because if you're doing a shoot of this nature, it may help to meet face-to-face with the people in charge, because the first location we found, which was the one top right, was absolutely lovely, and we're all set to sort of hire it, and even though it's very expensive, only to mention to the manager what we were doing, and their face just went white. It's like, okay, we're not using this place then. You know, the notion of food being splattered around their venue was met with absolutely not. Okay, well, that's out the window. The other thing was, on this hot July day that we were tramping around London, I was carrying quite a lot of kit because I was planning on doing full lighting setups. Because by this point, we're about a month into pre-production by now. I'd already run through in my mind, okay, this is how I'm going to approach this problem, and I wanted to try and test it as early as possible. Now, here comes the technical bit, okay? What I want to do now, I want to literally walk you through my thought process on a technical level, right from getting the initial brief to us realizing the shot when we started shooting. Straight up, I know I've got to freeze motion. That's going to be one of the main things I've got to get. So I'm going to want a nice fast shutter speed. That means I need a lot of light, but of course we're not shooting outside. So if we're shooting inside, well, traditionally we're going to have a lot less light. Well, okay, maybe we can bring a lot of light in. Now, if we want continuous light of any sort, whether it's tungsten, HMI, Kino Flow, LED, we are going to need a hell of a lot of it to freeze motion. I mean, you know, kilowatt upon kilowatt upon kilowatt. So flash is probably going to be the better option. Now, I'm absolutely happy with that. That's great. I shoot with flash all the time. Very, very comfortable with it. But there is a small catch. I really want to use the 10 frames a second on the D500, so I've got this handy safety net of not just the one perfect moment, but a nice big band of shots around the moment when Tom strikes something. And of course, as lots of you probably know, you take a flash that's putting out a lot of light and it will go flash, and I'm ready again, and it's not going to work. Okay, so start, think. Okay, let's turn the way down. Brilliant. You might not appreciate, but of course the way they work, the capacitors in flashes, is on full power. Capacitor's full of power, you fire off a full power charge, and the capacitor empties to very, very nearly the very, very bottom. It keeps a little bit in there to start again. If you shoot on half power, it takes half of it out, another half out, so you can get 2 shots before it fills up. You know where the numbers are going, okay? So if I shoot at about 1/16th power, I'm going to get at least 10 frames of flashes keeping up with me, because it'll go chop, 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 chop through the capacitor. Great, so I'm at 1/16th power. Catch now is, of course, 1/16th power is not a lot of light. How am I going to deal with this? Well, I can add lots more flash guns, for one. I own 5 of them, and of course I'm shooting a campaign for Nikon, so I can say, excuse me, and get some more. Secondly, I can turn the ISO up on the camera. I've been a photographer for a very, very long time, so, you know, way back in the film days, and I'm only just overcoming my resistance to high ISOs, okay? But of course, as most of you know nowadays, it's just, you can do what you like. You know, you can just turn the ISO up as high as you like. The images are still incredibly clean. The D500 is just clean all the way up to about at least 1600, possibly even past that. So I've got no worries on that front. What's also fantastic about turning the flash power down, and not all of you might be aware of this, is that the duration of the flash will drop massively. Now, this isn't something you can really pick up with a native eye, unless you're some sort of X-man. But if you fire up a flash gun, the duration of that flash will be in the region of hundredths of a second. And that's quite fast. Until you realize that down at 1/16th power, the duration of that flash is more like 1/10,000th of a second. That's not very long at all, okay? And it gets faster the less power you're putting out of the flash gun. Okay. By the way, I still call them flash guns because that's what they were called when I started using them. I know they're called speed lights, but I still call them flash guns. Do indulge me. So I've got 1/10,000th of a second flash duration or thereabouts. Now, why this is amazing and really, really useful is that it effectively becomes my shutter speed. If you imagine I'm downstairs in a basement, there's no real ambient light hitting Tom and the object he's striking. I'm at about 1/250th of a second of sync speed on the D500. I'm at maybe f5.6, ISO 100. If I take a shot without the flashes on, it's all going to be nearly black, so it's almost totally dark. So, of course, the light that's hitting him, which in this case is less than 1/10,000th of a second duration, becomes the shutter speed. Okay, it's a handy little cheat of physics that allows you to get incredibly short shutter speeds, even though actually my shutter speed is 1/250th of a second. The next little challenge comes with triggering the flashes. Now, as I'm building up my thought process ahead of time, I don't know how many I'm going to need yet, but I've got a good idea it's going to be pushing double figures. I also know I've got to cover quite a lot, and I know that some of them might be hidden away behind things and not easily accessible. I've got to work out how to trigger them all, and trigger them at 10 frames a second. Now, I've used Nikon's creative lighting system a few times. It is insanely clever. It'll mean that I can have this on here, and lights over there will be powered. They can adjust their powers accordingly. You can use TTL metering, all sorts of things. But I have found a couple of catches with it. Thing one is it does prefer to have line of sight. It's, you know, in a small area, it's kind of okay. If you start hiding guns away behind things, it's not as reliable. And it's also not as reliable if you go at 10 frames a second. It often needs a little bit of time to think. However, built into all of these flash guns, including Neil at the back, who's got two clutched in his hand, turn them on, please, pay attention, keep up, is something called SU4 mode. Okay, weird sounding name. It's basically an optical slave, like you would get in studio flashes that you find all over the place around here. It's a very simple optical slave that means basically it sees a flash and it fires its flash. Simple as that. Okay, this is my SB900 that I've had about 10 years. This is my battered, taped up, melted, SB800. At the back, Neil has got an SB80DX, which is 14 years old-ish, something like that. And he's got a brand spanking new SB5000. All of the U4 mode, okay? They will all work as just dumb optical slaves. It's fantastic, robust technology. It's so simple that we have to be careful in here because anybody else sets a flash off, they're going to go off as well. When I'm working on location in London a lot, emergency vehicles will set them off. Okay, with the strobe light on top of the ambulance, we'll set the strobes off. But it means, if you'll indulge me for a second, if I turn everything on, are you on at the back, Neil? And your thumbs are not covering the sensors. So this is on manual 1/16th power. This is set for 10 frames a second. And with any luck, as I blast this off, make sure you've got your hand over the sensor, Richie. Okay, point it my way. Oh, don't bait him in at the floor, Neil. I hope you put fresh batteries in yours. Anyway, on the shoot, as you will see, they all work perfectly. I'm going to blame the two men at the back for that. The catch is, though, of course, I can't control the output. Like I said, CLS is fantastic. It'll let you control the output back and forth. These are all just on manual. Now, I am, as I said, very, very old school. That isn't a problem for me. I've grown up using Studio Flash, very, very manual, old-fashioned things. It's not an issue, okay? A situation like this, where I've got control over where Tom is and what he's hitting and where all the flashes are, I'm in manual on everything. You want to try again, aren't you? Okay. Once more with feeling. I'm going to point them right at you. There you go. Mind your fingers. There he goes. Okay. He's happy now. He can sleep in peace. So I'm totally in manual. Okay, manual exposure on the camera, manual exposure on the flashes, because everything is set in a certain place. And I know where it's going to be, and I know what's going to happen each time, and I want that consistency. See, if I was in any sort of automatic exposure mode on the camera or on the flashes, as I take the first shot, it'll give me a perfectly decent exposure. You know, there's Tom and there's a watermelon or something. But of course, the frame is going to change. The frame might get a lot lighter or a lot darker across a 12 frame burst, a 15 frame burst, and the exposure will then start to vary. It might go up or down a little bit. I don't want that. If I'm in manual and everything's set, I know what's going to happen and I can be consistent with it. So everything is on manual. Now, I should point out that's a very sort of me way of doing things. I love lots of new school toys. I've got all sorts of clever tech, but I won't use anything like that until I've proven it time after time after time, and I want things to be consistent and to be reliable. I would far rather have old school stuff than new school stuff that promises bits but doesn't actually deliver on the day under pressure. So we've got about 11 flashes in total. They're all on SU4 mode. They're all in manual power. They're all down at about 1/16. We've got our D500, although this appears to be a 5 for some reason. That's on 10 frames a second. That's set to manual exposure. All the props have arrived on location. Our talent is here, all the personnel. We're probably good to get started with the shoot. Starting with the simplest first. Now, we started with eggs, both because they're a simple, easy thing to build up our sort of skills with, and also to give me a chance to get any appalling food or egg puns out of the way early. We were successful in the first half. The second half, I'm afraid, all day long, I just, pun after pun after pun. Just be very grateful you weren't there. What you see up here is, that's one of the finished images on the right there, and that's just an outtake from behind the camera, but it's actually a very, very important shot. Okay? You see Tom there very carefully, thoughtfully lining up his egg. Despite 10 frames a second and all the rest, we did not do what I call spray and pray all day, just blasting away hoping stuff happened. Every single thing we did that Tom struck or hit or attacked, we rehearsed and worked through in advance, worked out, right, what's the best way to hit this, strike this, where's it going to come in from, where are you going to be, where will I be, where will the lights be? And to make it worse, we had 3 video cameras running the whole time as well. So I can't just blast away and hope it happens. I need to be coordinated with Tom, with the object, with the video crew, the whole lot. So that's actually quite a crucial part of how we were working. We had, for example, lots of eggs, as you can imagine, but we had, I think, only 2 cakes, only 4 pumpkins, and not many sheets of ice. So, of course, we can't just keep mucking about willy-nilly because we'll soon run out of stuff to play with. Once we got that in the bag, we started to get a bit ambitious. Started attacking watermelons. These, of course, look a bit more dramatic than eggs. It's at this point, though, that I have to issue the standard health and safety warning. Do not try this at home, kids, okay? Do not go home, buy a watermelon, and punch a watermelon. You will break your fingers, okay? They are very, very hard. We thought this through in advance because, obviously, the man had tested it with a cricket bat, and we took with us an industrial-sized microwave, okay, and gave him a good zap beforehand because that softens them up enough, allowing Tom to actually break in, and also they explode better. Now is the second health and safety warning. Let them cool first before hitting them. Okay? I am not sure whether getting a watermelon burn is better or worse than getting a watermelon fracture, but neither are particularly. So from there, it was time to start punching pumpkins out of the air. Now, we did only 2 of these because he was that good. We picked this one for the final because it kept its shape better than the other one. He was, I should praise him eternally, he was so precise all day long. He was just clipping things out of the air. Credit must go to Nabil from the agency, who was just out of frame going like that in a perfect arc, but he was just plucking things out of the air absolutely perfectly. By now, you can imagine we are getting quite messy. Now, Tom was an absolute trooper about the whole thing, but then he did have people to come and towel him off every time. Meanwhile, we were cleaning up after every single shot because otherwise things would have got very, very bad very, very quickly. I can also vouch for, doing my sales bit, the D500 at no point throughout the day was in any way affected by having food on it. So that's a big plus. If you're thinking of buying one, they are great around food. Okay, I can vouch for that. Messiest of the lot by far was tearing cartons of juice open. Okay, you can see why he's got his eyes closed. I think he instinctively just went and tried not to get juice in his eye. He did, as you'll see from this little video, get juice everywhere, predictably. Look how slick the floor is. And you can imagine, it was early September we shot this, quite warm, starting to get a bit fusty by now. Basically, between almost every take, we went out with a mop and cleansed things off because it was getting very, very messy. Now, one of the shots I was most anxious about was him kicking a cake apart. My big concern was that there was actually, again, quite a big injury risk. I couldn't work out how we're going to place this, how is he going to attack it. And after lots of back and forth on the day with myself, my assistant, and the various guys, we literally just ended up putting it on a table, put a tablecloth over it. I was terrified, of course, that he was going to swing in and smash his shin on there, and that would be that. Now, of course, I was thinking that, based on my experience with an orange belt in karate 20 years ago, Yeah, he's a professional fighter. It was like a surgeon. He just every single time swung in, clip, 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 clip. We had 2 cakes. Each one was 1 layer, 2 layer, 3 layer, 1 layer, 2 layer, 3 layer. The boy was a machine, it must be said. You can see here just how neat he is when he goes through and clips them off. Just as precisely like, I mean, he could have written his name with his foot. He was incredible. I wouldn't invite him to your wedding, but yeah, he's definitely safe around this sort of thing. I should, however, hold my hand up and say we did cock one up. Okay, full disclosure, the bag of flour shot we had planned did not work. Watch what happens with the bag of flour. And poof. We didn't really think it through. We hadn't quite appreciated the structure of something like that, and that, of course, if you secure it at the top, it will all start to clump down the bottom, and then the middle bit will become very, very weak indeed. That was within seconds of starting shooting. It just bump, 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 thunk, and done. Ah, bugger. Okay, so we basically sort of gathered it back up, taped it all back together. What we were hoping we would get was lots of little bits like that. So we'd made like tiny holes. We thought there'd be little puffs of flour. No, it just tore itself apart. We also had our only moment of being uncoordinated, if you like. As I said earlier, Tom was amazing the whole day. He was so on point, but impetuosity, and without anybody saying so, he just suddenly swung in a roundhouse kick and cleaved it apart. It was like a hot knife through butter, just went straight through it, and none of us were ready. We went, oh, and of course it's now in pieces on the floor. But, you know, one moment of impetuosity in a whole day, can't really complain. Now, the props themselves were a bit dangerous. Again, we hadn't quite thought through the whole ice thing. Now, if you ever want to break ice up, making sheets of ice is very, very easy. Take a large freezer bag, put water in it, seal it up, put it in the freezer, let it go solid, and then take it out, cut the plastic off, and away you go. The tricky bit is in how you rig it. Of course, if you rig it too tightly, it'll shatter as you're rigging it. If you rig it too loosely, it's just going to come flying off. And you've also got to make sure that you rig the arms properly. I'm ashamed to admit that was my responsibility, myself, my assistant. He swung through it, and the arms swung after him and actually scratched him. I don't think he batted an eyelid compared to what he's used to in the ring, but it did actually go after him as he went through. And I don't think we'd either have we realised just how sharp it can get. Again, in this video, there we are cutting off the sheets, rigging it properly. Look at the edges of some of the ice. He is wisely wearing gloves. Yeah, yes, indeed, drawing in of breath. We hadn't really thought it through. He was very professional. He took a look at it, okay, in a very French way, and I take this on, and he went and got his gloves. I am not going near that without gloves on. He didn't get a scratch, I'm happy to say, but again, we thought we'd thought of everything, but you never do until the rubber meets the road. By the end of the day, I think we'd done 470-something shots, obviously which got edited down later. We were quite lucky in that we were downstairs in a basement, and the floor above us was a restaurant, and they took everything else off our hands. Happy days. I was told the starter that night was watermelon, fig, and feta salad. Don't know what happened to the pumpkins. I assume the juice ended up in cocktails. So after the shoot, my job is to process everything. I make a very basic edit. I get rid of anything that's utterly unusable, of course, but then I deliver everything to the agency, and they pass it on to Nikon, and there's lots of back and forth about what they need and what they don't need. Very happy to report they came back asking for what originally asked for, so that's nice for the bank balance. We like that. And once that's in place and I've got the shortlist, I then retouch them. I've included this image because this is the most retouched of the lot. Okay, and you can play a basic game of spot the difference between the two images. Okay, and as you can see, all I did was take out bits of tape, bits of paint, the tape that held the watermelon in, and obviously logos on his clothes. And I've adjusted colour and sharpening and contrast, etc., etc. What I haven't done, and didn't do to any of them, is adjust any of this. None of that was ever photoshopped, and without sounding artistic, if they had come back and said, oh, can you make that explosion a bit bigger? I would have said no, because that's not what we did. You know, we made lots of big explosions. It would not work if we stood here saying, this is an amazing camera, it does this, and then we photoshopped in a load of impact. Okay, that just wouldn't be right. But yeah, certainly sharpen it up a little bit, punch the colour up, and most of the other shots had nothing like that much done to them. And maybe a tiny logo here was taken out or something. That was it. Everything else was just given contrast and colour, and away we went. So off they all went. I give all the images over to the agency. They do all sorts of work. And mid-November, it went out to 27 degrees, which is quite nice. Oh, I've gone too far, sorry. Without sounding full of myself, I've been published as a photographer for more than 24 years now. So, of course, seeing things in print, it's not the novelty it once was. However, when you see your stuff in Greek and Russian and French and Croatian and every language under the sun, and it's in the Telegraph, and it's in Petapixel and F-stoppers, and it's on every social media channel, yeah, it's quite nice. And it's also, you know, agency very, very pleased with it, and Nikon very, very pleased with it. So happy days there. I want to wrap everything up, actually, by being a little bit philosophical. A shoot like this is a reminder of why I love photography and why I do it. One of the earliest lessons I learned a very long time ago now is that a camera is kind of a method to encourage people to muck about and perform and do things they wouldn't normally do. And that's wonderful. That's a fantastic thing to be able to do. Most of us, if we're honest, are pretty camera shy. Okay, not most of us like having cameras shoved in our faces. But I learned really early on, I wasn't even 16 when I learned this, that if you can make somebody look awesome, they'll happily have their picture taken. In fact, they'll ask for opportunities to have their picture taken. If you can show them at their peak, then suddenly they're desperate to work with you. If you can show them something exceptional, they'll be on your side. You can do almost anything you like, and that's wonderful. You can imagine working that out at 16, what that meant to me. That was like, right, this will do for a job. Which takes me to my next point, which is that this is the only job I have ever done, okay, with the exception of sitting on a production line every summer in college, watching boxes of Weetabix go past. This is the only job I have ever done. Now, I was actually quite happy every summer sitting watching boxes go past. However, I didn't think that was going to last forever. And whilst it was perfectly decent, I was making nice money, thank you very much, I wasn't creating anything. And something that I've come to recognize years and years down the line is how important that simple act of creation is. That the simple fact that at the end of the day, I get to have something in front of me and go, we made this. This is fantastic. It's easy, even as a professional, to get quite tired and jaded and cynical. I mean, I do however many 100 shoots a year, and you know, if it's the nth fitness instruction shoot, the nth, 100th golf instruction shoot, yes, it pays the bills, it's better than sitting staring at the walls, but it's not going to rock my world. But then sometimes you're given an interesting concept to play with, you're given lots of time to play with things, lots of ideas and creativity, and it kind of reminds you, oh yes, this is why I'm doing it, isn't it? This is what it's about. You know, it takes lots of time, took quite a lot of people, a small amount of money too, but at the end of the day, it all just comes down to creating interesting images that hopefully people will stop and look at. There you go. I hope it encourages you to go out and shoot some high-speed stuff. Fantastic. Thank you, folks.